Don't mistake possibilities for probabilities. Anything is possible. It's the probabilities that matter. Everything must be weighed in terms of its likelihood and prioritized. Ray Dalio.
We at the Fed understand the hardship that high inflation is causing. We're strongly committed to bringing inflation back down, and we're moving expeditiously to do so. We have both the tools we need and the resolve that it will take to restore price stability on behalf of American families and businesses. The labor market is extremely tight, and inflation is much too high. Against this backdrop, today the Federal Open Market Committee raised its policy interest rate by 0.75 of a percentage point. We anticipate that ongoing rate increases will be appropriate. The pace of those changes will continue to depend on the incoming data and the evolving outlook for the economy. Clearly, today's 75 basis point increase is an unusually large one, and I do not expect moves of this size to be common. From the perspective of today, either a 50 basis point or a 75 basis point increase seems most likely at our next meeting. We will, however, make our decisions meeting by meeting, and will continue to communicate our thinking as clearly as we can.
The Fed threw a curveball to the market. They said 50 basis point rate hike each meeting, and then came out with 75 basis points. Powell was trembling while giving this news. There's simply too much debt for high interest rates, and he knows it.
So is a recession or even a deep recession inevitable? And yes, recessions are always inevitable. It's just a question of time, and where we are now is in such an unusual place. And we have enough deterioration and we have enough actions going on with the Fed reversing course that yes, a recession is probably coming in 2023 is my guess. And a lot of questions about what would be the government and the central bank's response to such an outcome. And I think there's basically, they only have one technique, and it's to slash interest rates and or go to massive money printing. And I do think that that's coming in the next recession. Particularly, we're going to have more free money, I believe, because there is no other tool. And the powers that be do not want a deep recession to develop against the debt burden that we have. And I think we're going to try those same techniques one more time. And that is one of the reasons, again, why I'm longer term negative, very negative on the US dollar. And so it's really the dollar weakness comes with the recession. So a lot of questions about the inflation rate. As I said earlier, I think I would just use my guess for 2022 full year inflation to be around 6%. There are people talking about oil. Where do I think oil's going? And for the time being, I think that it's pretty clear that, like all commodities, the path of least resistance seems to be up. So I'm going to say that I think we'll see this summer the potential for WTI to perhaps hit 150. It might not last there.
A recession is coming, and the central bank's one tool is to flood the world with cash. Gundlach gives a timeline of 2023 and emphasizes one last time. And this is why he's negative on the dollar. We're talking about a sovereign debt crisis, and historically, when these events happen, they change the world. The timeline is running parallel to a digital asset timeline. Central bank projects are in testing phases. Regulations are around the corner. The old money is rotting, and digital currencies and assets are the next leap in the evolution of money.
And then the final question, because we're coming up on time, our country's going to have to buy gold to pay for Russian oil and wheat. You might have to buy rubles to pay for Russian oil and wheat, but they probably would take gold. But that's another aspect about the dollar, is we're starting to see, with geopolitical tension, with Russia and China being friendlier with each other than they are individually with the United States, which is the opposite of the Kissinger doctrine, which served us well for decades. We're now losing our global reserve currency status is slowly slipping away, with us having contention with these other powers and with the Chinese economy on the ascent, and their savings way above ours, et cetera, and their population and their GDP and everything else. So the dollar is probably going down.
When the dollar drops, when this is all said and done, What will replace the reserve currency? Ray Dalio believes China's yuan will replace the dollar. When that happens, there will be a war. If any other country had the reserve status, they would abuse the power just as much as the US or more. China is known for their capital-controlled surveillance over the citizens. This is why I disagree with Dalio. This is why there have been bubbles that surround crypto asset technologies, because this tech is revolutionary and it's not just hype. Imagine a protocol that no one can control. Money, assets that are free from counterparty risks, that are free from an entity seizing your assets, free from anyone blocking you from using the protocol. It is completely open for everyone to use and more secure than centralized systems.
I don't know whether I'm seeing it, but I expect it to. You can't build over $2 trillion in wealth in purchasing power and then take $1 trillion of it out and not matter. John, I also have high frequency signals, and there certainly seems to be a strong correlation between crypto and the NASDAQ. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out why. So I'm looking at it as an indicator that way. Crypto, everything that Charlie Munger says about it, I'm sympathetic to. Everything that says Bill Miller says about it, I'm sympathetic to. So I think that's a movie that has yet to be played out, and one that I don't want to bet on in conviction, but I will be very surprised if blockchain isn't a real force in our economy, say 5 years from now to 10 years from now, and not a major disruptor with companies that will have been founded between now and then that'll do very well, but that will also challenge things like our financial companies and do a lot of disruption. So I find crypto interesting. My 69th birthday is in a couple of weeks. I'm probably too old to compete intellectually with the young people in this space, but I'm certainly monitoring it.
Stan Druckenmiller was a portfolio manager for George Soros. He would be surprised if blockchain in the next 5 years was not a major disruptor and replacing financial institutions.
With 30 of these open protocols on behalf of their communities to put together the equivalent of bottoms-up quarterly reporting for these assets. So I would argue that there's probably no one in this room, arguably in the industry, that's done more in whistleblowing and transparency efforts than I have. I broke into the industry whistleblowing the Mt. Gox bankruptcy. I was, I think, a few years ahead, respectfully, of the SEC on Ripple in terms of talking about the overstatements that they had with their market cap and some of the shenanigans that they had with insider transactions and obfuscating some of their marketing materials versus what the reality was as they were distributing these tokens. And I work on this with my team full time, trying to solve some of these information problems. I want to try to keep my remarks relevant to Commissioner Peirce's comment.
Apparently, Ryan Selkis was whistleblowing to the SEC about Ripple's quarterly reports. He is now tweeting anti-SEC tweets, but in the past was providing them information. He has an on-chain analytics report called the Mazzari Report, and once worked for Digital Currency Group, which is strange because Digital Currency Group was invested in Ripple.
Yeah, it does. And I think, the work that we're doing at DTCC, we're looking at both private and public blockchains. And I think that's really important because, again, we want to make sure that we have that optionality within our solutions. And there are different trade-offs between the different public protocols and private protocols. So when we are looking at the public protocols, we recognize that there is an immutability that needs to be recognized. There's certain, there's certain trade-offs that we're just going to have to be aware of. When we think of the private blockchains and those protocols, obviously we have a significant degree of flexibility in terms of governance. And so the constraint of immutability is not as permanent there. And when you think of, our DTCC and our clients, we are sat in a highly regulated industry. And so we need to be really thoughtful about what it means to look at the trade-offs that the technology applies, but understand that this needs to function within the regulatory framework. And so private blockchains have been very interesting to us for that reason, for the flexibility that they provide. And within that flexibility, there are fewer trade-offs that we have to evaluate in terms of the use case.
Right. Yeah, obviously, the big trade-off, what you miss out on is perhaps the reachability of a public blockchain, but that may not necessarily be the mission that you're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
DTCC is in charge of all of the stocks in the United States. They literally custody every single stock certificate that exists. DTCC is exploring public blockchains. A public blockchain is a crypto. She explains that public chains are immutable, and private permission systems allow more flexibility, or in other words, they can reverse transactions. The IOU system on the XRP ledger allows freezing, reversing of transactions, etc. And to be clear, it's only IOUs that you could freeze. Now, when we think about a public chain is like the internet, while a private permission system is like your office's network. I can print, share music with everyone in my home, but it's very limited. While apps on the internet flourished because it was open to developers and users, and it's constantly expanding with better products and services.
I think that the answer to your question is there are other options, and the onus on us is to explore these options and determine which capabilities each technology solution and architecture in many ways is a best fit for the problems that we're trying to solve. So, for example, there are going to be other, distributed database solutions that could be applied in, light of solving these problems. But when you start to then add on additional capabilities like tokenizing a security and providing smart contract or programmable functionality, to a transaction, then you start to really unlock some of the power that distributed ledger technology provides. And so it's that aggregation of a variety of capabilities that have pointed us to this particular technology. But I do think that it's important to pull out, the point that you're making, James, which is that blockchain is in many areas a solution in search of a problem. And so we've taken a very critical view when we evaluate our use cases to ensure that a blockchain solution that we are applying is a very tightly scoped one for the use case that is not just putting a solution on a chain, but rather understanding what additional capabilities and therefore value that we can unlock by putting a solution on a network or on a chain.
DTCC is critical of blockchain for obvious reasons, but for tokenization, programmable money, and micropayments, a variety of use cases, quote, you unlock the power of distributed ledger technology. Quote, a blockchain solution that we are applying is a very tightly scoped use case. So they're applying a blockchain solution. Donald Donahue from DTCC is an advisor for Ripple Labs. He's a board member. I'm very interested in the capabilities distributed payment technology seem to offer for improving the safety, soundness, and cost-effectiveness of global payments and settlement infrastructure, Donahue remarked. Ripple is already a clear leader in the space. I'm looking forward with Ripple Labs' team to deliver on these exciting possibilities. The more you think you know, the more closed-minded you will be. Ray Dalio. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoy work like this and wish to support my channel, please consider joining my Patreon.